One of the questions I get asked the most is, how exactly did you study for the DAT? My name is Colby and I scored a 26 AA, 25 PAT on my very first attempt. So in this video, I'm going to break down my full DAT study plan for you. To be completely honest with you, when I first started studying for my DAT, I was honestly very overwhelmed at first. There was so much content to cover, I genuinely had no idea where to start or what to do with my time. But I quickly realized that what I really had to do for myself was I really just needed to simplify things for myself. So my way of doing so was by splitting up my preparation into three main phases, starting with just building my foundations, then transitioning into practice, and then finally refining my skills until testing. During my first month of studying, I knew that I couldn't just jump into doing hundreds of practice questions without first building my foundational knowledge. So that's where I started. I started by trying to understand the DAT as a whole. How do the different sections work? How is biology different from chemistry? And how should I be studying for these two compared to reading comp or PAT, for example? And I honestly found like a good place to start for this was DATCrusher's videos. Right at the beginning, they teach you these foundations. Okay, what are you going to be learning in biology? What are the 6 different types of questions you could be asked for PAT? What are the different things that you should know for reading comp before you throw yourself headfirst into all this? And honestly, I found that these videos really did a good job of actually explaining these things to you rather than just presenting you with information and leaving you off on your own. So this was a good place to start for me. For the biology section, I started by trying to go through at least one section's worth of video lessons per day, and that pretty much allowed me to get through all the biology content within the first month with a few extra days at the end. And yeah, I found the video lessons very helpful. As a visual learner, their visuals were amazing and really helped me understand what they were talking about. Oftentimes I'm asked like what I'm doing while watching these videos. What I like to say is taking notes could be helpful, but for me, I found that DATCrusher's pre-written notes were good enough for me. So instead, I only tried to focus on when I approached an area that I wasn't as strong in or something that I hadn't previously done. I tried to type my own explanations for those topics. So when I were to come back to them later, I would already have my own explanations there, which most of the time I understood a bit better. One other thing I will say is that keeping track of those weak areas is very helpful because at the end of the month, like I said, I had a few extra days. I sort of used those to go back to those videos and those sections that I wasn't as comfortable with, and I rewatched those videos, I read over those notes, and that really helped reinforce that information. For chemistry, I also started by watching the video lessons. Again, trying to watch around one section worth of lessons per day. But the good thing about these ones actually is that these lessons actually had practice questions integrated throughout. So after you watch a video, you have maybe 3 or so practice questions afterwards, which I personally found very helpful because it forced me to actively pay attention to the videos. Because you have questions coming up after, and knowing me, I didn't want to get those questions wrong. And if I did, I would know that I have to go back to that video, make sure I understood the concept, and then go and try those questions again. So again, that active forcing you to watch the video, I found very helpful. The other thing, while watching the videos and doing the practice questions, I also tried having a DATCrusher summary equation sheet next to me the entire time. And pretty much after 2 weeks of just watching videos, doing questions, scrolling through this sheet to find the right equation, I pretty much had that whole thing memorized within 2 weeks. And I found that very helpful moving on because not only do these equations help you for the calculation questions, but they can also help you answer some conceptual questions as well if you truly understand the concept. So my approach for PAT and reading comp was a bit different than it was for bio and chem, because bio and chem, again, are more knowledge-based, memorization-heavy compared to PAT and reading comp, which are more skill-based sections. It requires you to practice a lot. And I think the most important thing with these sections is consistency. So starting right from the bat for PAT, I started by watching the videos, as I did for all the sections. And the videos were very helpful because not only do they explain the 6 different question types, but they explain strategies for each of them, different ways that you could think about these question types and different ways you could approach it. So for angle breaking, for example, I remember they went through like a bunch of different types of ways you could look at these angles to help your brain visualize and compare the angles easier. So I found those helpful, but then after going through the videos, I went straight into practice questions because there's no other way to do PAT. And at first, to be honest, it was very slow. I found like I was pretty much getting like all these questions wrong. My brain has no idea what's going on. Felt like I wasn't going anywhere. But the key was just remaining consistent and practicing every single day. One last thing I'll say about PAT before moving on is that during my first month of studying, I primarily focused on accuracy over speed. And while at the end of the day, PAT will potentially come down to some time constraints, I know for me, like doing 90 questions in 60 minutes, yes, it's definitely gonna have to be very fast paced. But at the beginning of your studying, you really just need to get used to understanding these questions, getting these questions right, because once you become more comfortable with them, once you're getting more right, that's when you start picking up your speed. For reading comprehension, looking back, there were a lot of things I think I did correctly, but there were also a lot of things that I wish I did a bit differently. So let's start with the good stuff first. So first of all, I started by watching the DATCrusher reading comp videos, which I found very helpful for sort of introducing me to the different strategies, question types, etc. Then I transitioned into doing their question banks, which are kind of like their practice questions. And I found this helpful. I think what I really found helpful was the fact that I tried out different strategies. The thing with reading comp is that everyone has a different thing that works for them. Some people like the vanilla method, search and destroy, maybe reading the first and last paragraph and then going to do search and destroy, or maybe a mix of different methods. Whatever works for you is going to be what works for you, but what you have to do is figure that out. So I started by just doing a bunch of different question banks, trying out different strategies for each of them, sort of seeing, okay, how is my timing looking like? What are these scores that I'm getting? What do I feel most comfortable with? What are the strategies that work best for me and what might not work for me? So I started to figure that out. But what I wish I did do a bit earlier was, well, first of all, to preface, I am not a big reader. I don't personally enjoy reading, so going into this, I kind of knew that reading comp would be a struggle for me, and it was. And my reading time was very slow. The only way to improve that is to read consistently. So what I wish I did a bit earlier was I wish I either picked up a book, started reading scientific articles daily, just getting my brain used to reading things fast, and not only reading fast, but also understanding what you're reading while at a fast pace. So to me, that was something that I wish I started earlier, but otherwise, I think trying these different strategies will help you in the first month. One last thing for phase one is that I actually didn't write my very first full-length practice test until the end of my first month, mainly because I knew I wanted to go through all the bio and chem content first. I wanted to get my PAT and reading comp practice before getting that first score. So it's something that, again, it's completely up to you, but that's just what I did. So during my second month of studying is actually when I shifted away from just trying to learn all the content and I transitioned into applying what I've learned through practice questions and practice tests. And this is actually where I saw my greatest improvement in my practice test scores. For biology, I then did all the BioBits practice questions, which basically cover all the content in the video lectures. However, I didn't actually complete it all within that second phase. There were more questions than I was thinking. I didn't plan it correctly, so it carried a bit over into that third month. So if I were to recommend doing something differently, I would say maybe start it a bit earlier. But one thing I did during my practice question sort of phase is I used DATCrusher's marked question feature, which I found very helpful. I think you could literally just click the button to mark a question and it flags it for you. And there's this thing where you can literally go back and do all of your marked questions together. So all the questions I either got wrong or struggled with, I was able to go back and consistently review them, which was very helpful for me. For the second phase, I also tried incorporating some spaced repetition and active recall for biology by using DATCrusher's pre-made Anki decks. Again, it was too much to try to do all of the practice questions and all the Anki decks and all the Quizlets, so I really only used the Anki decks for the topics that I didn't feel as comfortable in, but again, they were already pre-made and they were very helpful. So for general chemistry for the second phase, there are actually two main things that I did. The first one is practice questions. So DATCrusher, I believe, has 10 practice questions per lesson for chemistry. But what I actually did was I only did 5 out of 10 for each of the lessons the first time I went through it. So I went through all the different lessons, did 5 out of 10. And after that, I went back and saw, okay, what are my weaker areas? What should I focus more of my energy on? But then I actually went back and reviewed all of either the lessons or the notes, depending on what I was feeling like. Went back and reviewed everything again, and then completed the 10 out of 10 for all of the lessons. So that was my way of doing the chemistry practice questions. I was also marking these questions as I went as well, like I did for biology. And the second thing I did for this second phase was what I like to call passive studying. So to me, this was literally just like having the general chemistry videos play in the background while I was cooking, cleaning, going for a walk, etc. And I constantly had these videos playing and it just reinforced all these concepts, reminding me of these things that maybe I hadn't reviewed in a while. So combining these active and passive methods of practicing really helped me improve during the second phase. For PAT, I continued to practice consistently every single day, but this time I tried to focus a bit more on the types of questions that I wasn't as strong at. So for me, it was primarily TFE and pattern folding and maybe a bit of keyhole. I guess that's a lot. The ones that I was feeling a bit more comfortable with, those ones I tried to really improve my speed for. So for hole punching, for example, I actually realized that I wasn't really getting a lot faster. So I changed my strategy a bit and I started using the 4x4 grid, and that helped me improve my speed a bit more. The other thing I did for PAT is I actually started practicing with some of my friends who were also writing the DAT. And so what we did was we kind of tried doing the exact same 15 questions for keyhole, TFE, and pattern folding, and then 15 generators each for angle, cube, and hole punch. And we tried to compete against each other. Oh, who can get more right in a shorter amount of time, sort of thing. And as a competitive person myself, this really helped me improve my speed, improve my accuracy. That, I feel like, is what really made me a lot better. So again, people have different ways of improving themselves, and that's just what worked for me. For reading comprehension, realizing that it was one of my weaker sections, I tried to spend a bit more time on it during the second month. I don't really have too much to say because really all it was about was just me trying to pick up a book every single day or just reading scientific articles, as hard as it was. But once I started getting my reading speed improved, I started doing a bit better on the question banks and the practice tests, but again, still remaining consistent to doing those. I continue to refine my strategies as well, just finding little tips and tricks that I know are going to help me on test day. And then, I guess like my practice test scores, I wouldn't say they were improving during this time, so I was feeling a bit frustrated. So what I actually tried doing was I went online, tried searching up some like Facebook threads and Reddit threads and YouTube videos to see what other people were doing when they were stuck. And those things actually did help me a bit. So as much as I say like refrain from letting that stress you out, I do think that there could be some value that could come from those websites and things like that. And in terms of full-length practice tests for the second month, I tried doing one every single week. Basically, for a DATCrusher, you're able to buy an extra 5 practice tests. So going into this, I knew that I had 15 practice tests. So I did one at the end of my first month. I was doing one every week for the second month. And then the third month, I started increasing a little bit. For me, this final month was all about maintaining what I had learned and filling any remaining gaps in my knowledge, as well as really ramping up my full-length practice tests while also stimulating real test day conditions. For biology, I primarily started to focus on the higher yield content, and my favorite way of doing so is by using the cheat sheets that DATCrusher provides. So these sheets basically summarize all of the main information for each of the sections for biology. And what I would do is I would like cover up one of the parts of the sheet and I would like see what I remember and see if it's right. And I would continue doing that until I made sure I had this higher yield information down. And then for like the other more detailed stuff, I would go back to those questions that I marked previously and I would continue redoing those until I refined all of those details as well. For general chemistry, I actually went back and reviewed all the notes, just briefly skimming through them to make sure that I was comfortable with all the concepts before moving on to just solely doing practice questions. I also reviewed the equation sheet that I had with me, where I pretty much just made sure I knew how to use each formula, I knew how the formulas related to each other, I knew which units to use and things like that. And once I had that down, I went back to actually redoing all those practice questions I did during my second phase. While it sounds like a lot to do, once you've already done all the questions once, the second time you do them becomes a lot faster. And even that also goes for reviewing the content in the notes. Once you've already done it, every single time just becomes faster and faster. So I was able to do that, and again, I went back to redoing those marked questions, the questions that I continued to get wrong or maybe wasn't 100% comfortable with until I felt confident in my chemistry skills. And finally, for PAT and Reading Comp, I'm actually going to group these together for this last one because for the third month, my strategy for these two was kind of similar. And it was simply just to continue doing practice, continue being consistent with it, making sure I was doing my daily PAT practice, I was reading, etc., etc. One thing that I found to be important for this last month was to avoid making any major changes to my strategies for either of these. Again, I found that it was really important to trust in myself, trust in the work that I put in, trust in the times that I've spent changing and refining my strategies for all the different parts of PAT and for Reading Comp. And even if I wasn't feeling like I'm going to go into this DAT and I'm going to 100% ace it, because I wasn't feeling like that, I still had to be confident in my abilities, I had to be confident in the work I put in, and I didn't want to make any major changes because I knew that would stress me out. So at the end of the day, that was my strategy. Hopefully this video has given you a better idea of what my DAT study plan looked like, and I also hope that in some way it's been able to help you create a structure or a plan that works best for you. I want you to remember that everyone's DAT journey is truly different, and what really matters is remaining consistent and being adaptable when needed, and also learning from your own and my mistakes throughout the process. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give me a follow on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube at Colby Dentistry for more DAT tips, dental school content, and just updates throughout my journey.